Well, everyone have a seat. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming to this. So, Houdini is the one who got me back into magic. I had started performing magic when I was a kid. My parents had given me a magic kit, and then much later, I started doing some research about Houdini and his very unusual relationship with Arthur Conan Doyle. I think probably these are two of the most famous men of the 20th century. They did become close friends later on in life, but then in about 2 years' time, they became the bitterest of enemies. It was awful. It went very public. So we will start first with Houdini's parents. His father was a rabbi, Mayor Samuel Weiss, and Houdini was born in Budapest in 1874. He had four other siblings. His father went to America in 1876. There is a rumor that he actually fled Budapest for murdering somebody. And he found a job as a rabbi in Appleton, Wisconsin. And the whole family emigrated to Wisconsin in 1878. Unfortunately, Samuel was not a great rabbi. Some people say it's because he never learned English. And he was fired. And they became citizens in 1882, but he couldn't make a living, so they moved to Milwaukee. They lived in poverty for a while, and then they moved to New York City, where Houdini at that point was selling newspapers, bringing home pennies, whatever he could get for the family. Samuel died of tongue cancer in 1892, and he made young Eric, that's what Houdini's name was, Eric, promise to always take care of his mother, which Houdini did for the rest of his life. So Houdini proved to be the most industrious of his siblings and was doing all sorts of jobs. He worked in a tie factory for a while. He worked in a lock manufacturer, which makes sense knowing what his career became. And he was also an excellent athlete. He was in cross country, and that's him in the middle with all these medals. Over here to my right is his brother Dash. His name was Theo, but everyone called him Dash, and they were very close through their entire life. In fact, Dash became a magician later on, calling himself Hardin. So they were doing their own private magic act. They were doing what was called the Metamorphosis, which I'll explain in just a moment. And things changed for Houdini when he met her. So this is Wilhelmina Beatrice Rahner, otherwise known as Bess. And she was a nice Catholic girl from Brooklyn. And she was singing with another young woman in Coney Island as a duo. And Houdini met Bess, and they fell, literally, it was love at first sight. That was on June 15th, 1894. Their love for each other was so powerful, they got married a week later. Much to the dismay of Bess's mother, who did not want Bess marrying a Jewish man. And in fact, the two women never reconciled until about 15 years later. Houdini was never allowed in Bess's mother's home. Now, Houdini had decided that Bess, who was only 4'10", by the way, Houdini was 5'4", just so you know the height thing here, and it's important for the metamorphosis. Bess was 4'10", and he thought she'd be perfect for the magic act, so he retired Dash from the act, and he and Bess started to perform the metamorphosis. But before that happened, he took Bess and Dash up onto the Brooklyn Bridge late one night, and it was a full moon, and he made them swear to the heavens that they would be loyal to him forever. Bess was terrified. She thought she had married a demon, and how do I get out of this? So, the Metamorphosis. This became the great Houdini's signature act. And basically what it is, you've seen this, I'm sure, on TV. There's a box. Houdini was handcuffed, put into a bag, which was then roped, stuffed into a trunk, and in this case, it was all tied up. Later, they had it all chained up, And then Bess gets on top with a curtain and counts to 3, 1, 2, 3. And when she drops the curtain, Houdini's standing on top. And then he opens everything up, and Bess is inside the bag with the handcuffs. So this got them on their way of performing magic. They started touring with circuses, and basically they really were living hand to mouth at this point. It's also interesting that they put together a spiritualist act where Bess was a psychic medium. They would, during the day, they would go to the local cemetery, get names of fresh graves, and then that night at the show, they'd say, "We see Joseph in the room," and people would be shouting and screaming. Unfortunately, they once did it with a woman whose young child had died, and she was hysterical, and at that point, they gave that up. So Houdini then moved into handcuffs. And this is really when his career started to take off. He would do handcuff challenges. He would put in the local paper, somebody could bring any handcuff whatsoever, and he would get out of it. And he usually did. There was only a couple of times that have been recorded when he got stuck in the handcuffs. But it did take he and Bess to Europe. They became the toast of the town in London and Berlin. And then they moved on to St. Petersburg. Now here's Houdini. These are publicity photos of Houdini. And you can see he's got sort of like bathing trunks here and some sort of a codpiece or whatever there. In reality, he performed these naked. Because what he was challenging the police in every city that he went. And they would lock him in a cell, strip him naked, handcuff him, whatever they was doing, to make sure that he didn't have any keys or anything hidden on him. One of the secrets is that he did have some small little pick in his curly hair. But when he got to St. Petersburg, they put him in this, I think it's called the Black Maria, and it was a wagon, a transport wagon for prisoners. They made extra sure he had no keys on him. Yes. We understand, right? So Houdini was very, very close with his mother, and as you can see, he's inscribed this, "My two sweethearts." Now, I love this photo because just look how Bess is looking at him. To me, she's saying, "You have got to be kidding." But the three of them, they were together. They traveled together. In fact, Bess and Houdini were rarely alone. He bought lavish gifts for his mother. He actually one day rented for a day Queen Victoria's dress that had been on display. But Cecilia died very suddenly in 1813, and Houdini was on tour. She died of a heart attack. And her death destroyed him. For the rest of his life, he never got over his mother's death. He blamed himself for not being with her and not keeping his promise to his father that he would always take care of her. This has a lot of importance for when he meets Arthur Conan Doyle. And here they are. So here's Arthur Conan Doyle, and this is his second wife, Jean Leckie. So Sir Arthur, of course, you all know him from the Sherlock Holmes stories. He had a first marriage, and Louisa was quite sickly for about 10 years before succumbing to tuberculosis. They had two children, a girl, Mary Louise, and son, Kingsley. And about the last 3 years of Louisa's life, Sir Arthur met Jean Leckie, and they had an affair, an extramarital affair, for 3 years. And they waited till Louisa died, and they waited about 6 months, I think it was, and then they got married. So Sir Arthur had been dubbed, I think it was 1902. So he was Sir Arthur. And all I can say about Jean is that she really enjoyed being called Lady Jean. She used that to her benefit. All right, we move now to the Cottingley Fairies. Now, I don't know if you've heard about these. So these two young girls, Elsie Wright and Frances Griffith, in 1917, took photos, borrowed the father's camera, took photos of them down in the garden with all of these dancing fairies. It became a big sensation when the local newspaper published the photographs. Here's another one. That's actually Elsie. And with that little dancing with that little gnome. Everybody believed that these photographs were authentic. Today it's really hard because they're obviously cutouts from magazines that they put on sticks and held in front of them. But there were a lot of scientists who actually examined these photos and claimed that they were authentic. Sir Arthur believed them as well. And he was the girls' biggest champions. There are some people who said, come on, it's cutouts. But he wrote a whole book on it, The Coming of the Fairies. And it defends the girls and talks about the afterlife with psychic phenomena, and that fairies are definitely a part of our world, and it takes very special people to actually see them. Truly, Sir Arthur's friends really thought he'd gone soft in the head. And I think it's like a little wonder, how could the creator of Sherlock Holmes be this gullible? Well, there's a reason for it. Just a couple of years before, his beloved first son, Kingsley, was killed in World War I. And Sir Arthur was also devastated by Kingsley's death and began seeking comfort by going to seances. Spirit mediums had become very popular, and he went to seance after seance and seance trying to find some comfort. And he does relate that one medium had him come through and said to Sir Arthur, I forgive you. And that helped Sir Arthur, but he was still very distraught. And I do believe that his grieving clouded his judgment when it came to everything that's about to happen. So in 1848, the Fox sisters in a small town claimed that they could communicate with the spirit who lived in their house. And in just a few years, this craze, called spiritualism, spread across the world. And there were psychic mediums everywhere. By World War I, there were millions of believers in spiritualism because there were so many widows and parents who had lost their sons to the war. Now, I have several pictures of these trance mediums, and they would all exude from some orifice what was called ectoplasm. And it's this gooey, gauzy stuff. This one is fascinating because she's got a spirit horn coming out of her ectoplasm. And the spirit horn was a popular device that often floated throughout the room in a seance. I've never seen one where it's actually coming out of her ectoplasm. Here's another one, completely overwhelmed by the ectoplasm during the seance. Another one out of her ear. And this one is fascinating. You can see that there's actually a face that's coming out of her ectoplasm. Now, Houdini was very quick to recognize that this was balderdash and that it was all trick photography, going back to the Cottingley Fairies. So he set up a proof of why these were phony, because there he is having a conference with Abraham Lincoln. Now, he and Bess, as I had said earlier, had been touring, doing a spiritualism act, and when he gave it up, he vowed that he was going to make his life after this point about debunking mediums. So he went to Hollywood. His first movie, which was a serial called The Master Mystery, was a big success. It's actually a lot of fun. You can find it on YouTube. There's this robot that is chasing them through the movie and putting the damsel in distress that Houdini is always getting out of these escapes and saving her. Then after that, he made 2 more movies, although Grim Game is fascinating because he is the first actor to have ever jumped out of a plane and swing from the plane while doing an escape. And it's filmed, and it's really actually quite gripping. The one after that wasn't so much fun. But then he did this interesting movie called The Man from Beyond, which is about reincarnation, which Houdini apparently believed in. And he was so enamored with Arthur Conan Doyle, he really wanted to meet him. So he has this close-up of himself in the movie reading Conan Doyle's book. And, well, this naturally got Sir Arthur's attention. They started corresponding with each other and soon became quite good friends. And even the two couples would vacation together. Well, that was about to change. So this is in Atlantic City. It's June 17th, 1922, when the two couples were vacationing in Atlantic City. And Lady Jean told Houdini that his mother wanted to speak with him through her. So they went up to the hotel room. Interestingly, Bess was not invited. I believe at this point, Bess really wasn't any longer in the act. She was kind of like second fiddle, and she'd taken to drinking a lot of champagne during the day. But it also made her very honest, very straightforward and honest. And I think Lady Jean didn't want such honesty in that room. So they went into the hotel room. Lady Jean goes into a trance, and she was doing what's called automatic writing, where she had a pen in her hand and lots of paper. So she started writing pages after pages after pages in perfect English, which Cecilia never spoke. And at the top of each page, she would put a crucifix. And again, Cecilia was Jewish, so it didn't make much sense. And it's all about, very, very vague stuff. Yes, it's beautiful here. I can't wait to be reunited, and on and on and on. And Houdini was very polite. He did think it was weird that the day before had been Cecilia's birthday, and she didn't mention it. He thanked them, and then he went back to the hotel room to Bess and just was enraged that they had tried to manipulate him to join their spiritualist side. So this really started, this is the first big fissure in their relationship. Meet Margery. So Margery, her real name is Mina Crandon. She was athletic, very pretty, very sensuous. She wasn't a typical psychic medium. She avoided the spotlight. She was married to a prominent surgeon who was known for his belly button appendectomies. His nickname was actually Buttonhole Crandon. Anyway, she used the pseudonym named Margery, and she would hold seances channeling her dead brother Walter, who had been killed in a train accident. Now, Walter is fascinating because he was very foul-mouthed. He had a big, gruff voice, and he would insult the seance participants. He would make fun of them while he was floating around furniture. That's Margery in seance, and Buttonhole is right next to her over there to her right. Things would float, bells would ring, and Walter would be shouting obscenities at everybody. She also would put on and I don't believe this is it, this is a stage photograph, but she would put on just a flimsy kimono. She was naked underneath. And frequently during the seance, the kimono would fall off. On purpose, accidentally. So you can understand why she was such a popular medium amongst the men. Just to get a drink of water here. So Scientific American magazine formed a committee to investigate psychic mediums. And Sir Arthur was on this committee. And when Scientific American, after doing hundreds of seances, decided that Margery was the real thing and were going to give her a prize of $2,500, Houdini just told him, demanded, you get me on that committee. So Sir Arthur agreed, and everyone on the committee thought that was a good idea because they were all believers and Houdini was the skeptic. So Houdini didn't believe for a second. He was attracted to Margery, there's no doubt about it. She was very flirtatious with him. He didn't know, though, that she was sleeping with half of the committee. And so he was basically on his own to disprove her. So he created what was called the Margery box. That's him on the left, that demonstrating it, and here she is in the actual seance in the box. And this was to limit all of her movements because he believed that she very cleverly used her hands and her feet, because she was athletic and very lithe, to create all these manifestations that were supposed to be what Walter was doing. So the box was clamped. There's no way in or out for her. She had her hands clasped by the people in the seance. Now, the first 2 times that this happened, it was somewhat controversial. The first seance with her in the box, somehow Walter managed to flip open the top. Even though she was holding hands, the box flipped open. So Houdini padlocked it for the next one. So the next seance, a folding ruler was found inside the box, which Houdini claims she planted there so that she could unwrap it and move things around. She claimed that he put it in there. I believe that Houdini planted it because there's no way that Margery could have picked up that folding ruler and lifted tables and things. So Houdini, I believe in this case with Margery, I understand, I empathize why he wanted to disprove, because of his strong belief and that he would communicate with his mother when he died, but not during present time. She did some remarkable things. There were things that were levitating around the room. She knew information. In fact, she knew a piece of information that only Houdini would know, or Walter knew this information. But he was really blinded. He wanted to just prove that she was an absolute phony, which he did. However, and this is his article where he says that she was a phony, and then he wrote this pamphlet that was widely distributed that explained all of her methods. This is one of them. What he did is that he put a sock on his calf, and very, very tight. And so his calf would be very sensitive. And so he insisted that she would move her foot to try and ring that bell that was underneath his feet there, get her toes out and hit that bell, and would rub against his calf. That may and may not be true. Another one of the photos, I couldn't get a really high definition one, has her manipulating one of those spirit horns up above her head. But if she's holding hands with everybody, I don't understand how that thing could have floated. But it's Houdini believed that she was a complete phony. So naturally, Sir Arthur came to her defense. And this is when everything went really bad. So Houdini had written this book, Magician Among the Spirits, that outlined all of the methods that spiritualists, phony spirit mediums used. It's in detail. He goes through it, and basically you read it now, it's like a handbook for magicians of all the tricks that these mediums were doing. Sir Arthur defended her, and they were very public with their defense and attack on Margery. And Houdini took it a step further. He went on tour with the Margery box, and he demonstrated how it was all done and reminded the audiences about the Cottingley Fairies, and that only someone as gullible as Sir Arthur could actually defend this woman. Well, the two of them clearly never spoke to each other ever again. A year later, Houdini was performing up in Montreal, and he was resting backstage, and 3 students from McGill University came in. They were big fans, and one of them said to him, "Mr. Houdini, is it true that you can withstand any punch?" And he said yes, and Houdini had a particular way he would tighten his abdomen. It's like steel. And yes, people could punch him, and he wouldn't feel it. Well, he hadn't prepared, and this student punched him in the side. Now, what, of course, Houdini didn't know was that the punch ruptured his appendix. So Houdini went on stage, and It was hard to get through it because he was in a lot of pain, but he ignored it. He took the train, he and Bess took the train to Detroit, and he was on stage, had 104 fever, and he collapsed. So they brought him to the ER. So he did not die in the water torture cell, which you see in all the movies. This is unfortunately the rather sad way that he had died, less dramatic. When they opened him up, he was just filled with pus. And they didn't have the antibiotics at the time to save him, and so he died Halloween 1926. Sir Arthur and Jean became the forefront of the spiritualist movement. It started to die out, I'd say, sometime around the 30s. Sir Arthur died in 1936. Lady Jean kept giving seances. She was using a spirit medium named Phineas, who told all the stories about Atlantis, and she was connecting with souls in Atlantis. They had 3 children, although Jean never accepted Mary Louise, the first daughter, and she died in 1943, I believe. So for 10 years after Houdini died, Bess would hold a seance to try and communicate with him. And they had a code, a secret code between them. And every Halloween for 10 years, she would conduct this seance. At this point, she had taken up in a romantic relationship with a man named Edward Saint, who also claimed to be a psychic. Bess was, I won't say she was desperate to connect with Houdini, but she wanted some reassurance that they could communicate somehow in the afterlife. Hence is why they created this code word. And the code word comes from the song Rosabelle, which is what Bess was singing the night that they met on Coney Island. And they took several letters from it, and they created the word believe. So Rosabelle Believe was their secret code. October 31st, 1936, they held the seance. It was communicated on the radio all around the world. And it was the final Houdini seance on the top of the Roosevelt Hotel in Hollywood. And Houdini did not come through with the secret code. And Bess said, "My dear Houdini is never going to come back." So Bess lived to, when did she die? She was 67. To Bess die, I think 1943. She dies of a heart attack. But one of the things that she said near on her deathbed was that she waited 10 years for Houdini, and that was quite long enough to wait for any man. So that's this amazing story of Houdini and Arthur Conan Doyle. I'm available for questions. I know there's another activity that's happening, but I just want to show you, if you're interested in reading more, there are these 3 terrific books. The first one, Secret Life of Houdini, really goes into in-depth. I had to skirt over a lot of things for time reasons. The second one is about Houdini and Conan Doyle's friendship. And this third one is about Margery, the Witch of Lime Street. And it goes into detail about her troubled marriage and basically the reasons why she was channeling Walter. And, of course, the relationship with Houdini. Thank you so much. Feel free to ask me any questions afterwards.